Jeremy is a gentleman, a very intelligent, well-educated and thoughtful gentleman.
There is this kind of sense of the polymath built into Jeremy, like the Renaissance man, that I really enjoy, and that the longer you know him, the more of those little bits of himself he reveals, always in a little kind of dry joke, often at your expense.
How would you describe Jeremy, Peter?
Impossible. No, we've never had an argument except over his music.
Yeah, then it turned out I was right anyway.
Wonderful sense of humour, always makes me laugh, and he's kind.
It's not entirely certain, but I know that I went to high school clear that I was going to be an architect without having any clear notion of what that actually meant. So probably when I was about 13, I suppose, just last year. This was in Gore, the hub of the universe, yes. I amused myself by each year drawing the new clutch of cars that came out of America and were illustrated in the Popular Mechanics magazine. I thought that was wonderful fun. Then I started doing buildings and laboriously engraved on foolscap paper with a 4H pencil. And so much so that when I went for an interview with the Ministry of Works, they looked at my drawings and asked me why I drew with a 4-inch nail.
His breadth of work is exceptional. Just in Auckland, he's involved as the conservation architect on Britomart, all the Britomart projects. We have a kind of standing agreement around projects on the Auckland War Memorial Museum. There are a huge number of projects around the country, significant places that Jeremy has, at one time or other, had an important hand in.
In a way, he's brought conservation out of that abstract kind of niche into the marketplace. I mean, that's our view of him anyway. You know, we're working architects, and in projects like Britomart, you just have to call on Jeremy straight up and say, look, this is where we want to go with this. What are the issues? How can we resolve them? And I mean, he's the first port of call, invariably, really.
It's a wonderful thing. I'm sort of envious of it. You know, he has this whole practice of his own, making beautifully crafted contemporary architecture, and then he's sort of insinuated himself into all of our practices as well. You know, and he's a great empowerer and accelerator and improver of projects.
It was the first decent-sized building that I got to work on as a heritage architect, and a process of discovery, finding out what the building was really made of. And in an effort to find out what the original colours had been, we did some paint scraping, I did. I think it was a weekend job. And started to discover all these other colours in the building, and enough was revealed to show a very elaborate paint scheme with stencils. And that's what you now see. And there was something like 9 different colours, I think, in this decorative symbol, including the gold-painted lead leaf patterns on the corners. I'm sure the Queen sat in one of these. Isn't that extraordinary? See, when you're here, you're not so much looking at what's on stage, you're looking at the hoi polloi. You're on display yourself. Well, the conservation plan is about process more than about, I mean, you let the building speak for itself. You know, we would replicate original drawings, because the original drawings, you know, this was all elevated, beautifully drawn. I think there were drawings of that. But you use photographs a lot, because the building has to speak for itself. But the conservation plan develops a kind of a conceptual and philosophical strategy for how you go about it. And it has to recognise the necessity, say, of seismic upgrade, and therefore change, and therefore suggest how you might go about that. And how much change can you make without destroying the very reason for preservation? This building would be wonderful to keep just as an object, but it's much better that it's used for the purpose for which it was made.
Jeremy has that kind of unique ability to focus on end results, but having a really good understanding of what's required in order to keep the show on the road. You know, whether that's the sustainable use of a building or even what's achievable technically. And he's just rock solid in that area. He'll offer strategies for moving forwards together. You know, he'll pull out a pen and do a tiny little a quick line drawing that will just say, you might like to consider this. You might like to consider relating to sill heights, a string course or something of that sort. You know, that offers a way forward.
The thing that a lot of people restoring a church, for example, or cleaning one up, first thing they want to do is sand the floors. And so the tactic there is don't mention the floors right till the end of the project because they're going to run out of money. And the last thing that they've got no money for is to sand, to ruin the floor. So
sanding the floor, and we can see it's all scratched and so on, but sanding the floor removes all that patina that ages and ages of use.
Got it left here.
Yes, yeah. And we say these are honourable scars of use. That's part of the character. And we always charge extra for the character, as I said. So Peter became my first partner, and he was my succession plan. But he retired early, so I'm stuffed, really. No, then we grew. The office grew. We got really too big for the one big room we had. And then we found another building in Devonport, which we acquired. And then 3 of our senior staff joined us and became partners. And 2 of those are still with us. And so Pete's retired, but now we're a partnership of 3. And we've got a succession plan, which is great. So this is, to my mind, one of the great building spaces in New Zealand. I just think it's fantastic. Working with buildings like this is, in its own way, a form of design, because we're, if you like, rediscovering the design intent of the original architect, and where sometimes that's been brutalised by change and so on. We hope to kind of give back that quality, that detail, if you like, that was so important in the original concept. So I firmly of the belief that working with old buildings is still a design process, but so too is adding to old buildings. And the greatest compliment you can give to an old building where you're changing it is to bring very high design skills to that. We were down one weekend. We were in the right frame of mind, and we were down here seeing Anne's mum. And we went up this road, because we used to go up here and do a bit of canoodling when we were younger, and saw the sign on the fence saying it was for sale. So by the end of the weekend, we'd put an offer in for some of the land, and we became owners about 1998, I think. So it's 20 years this year.
Yeah, well, this actually we used to have picnics as a family just down there. So we came up here quite a bit when we were kids. Yeah.
And that was before Cyclone Bola, when the river was quite clean and clear and had good swimming holes and gravelly bottom and so on.
Yeah.
If you'll pardon the expression.
We made a life in Auckland and worked a lot on our house there. So that was, I think, restoring that house was probably a big thing too, wasn't it? That's how you got to know villas inside out.
But it's also how we developed a partnership relationship in architecture and what we both do.
Because the house is recent. It's only, 4 years old now?
I did full working drawings for 3 buildings here before I got to this one. I got 2 building consents and through resource consents, I think.
Well, I think we kept on changing our minds how we wanted to live here, because we weren't sure whether we would ever shift here or whether it was just going to be, you know, weekend cottage or what really, and because life keeps changing. And I think if you look at the, you know, because the office has had a lot of awards, and when you look at it, they're these beautiful old buildings in many cases, not always, but quite a few of them are absolutely iconic old buildings, but they've been adapted in different ways that make them live on, you know. And I think it takes a certain generosity of aesthetic approach to actually admire what other people have done as architects in the past, and then to give it new life, I think, is to be able to do both those things is really lovely. And I think that translates into working with other architects in the present as well.
When you had said that, oh, we've got a place in Gisborne, I hadn't really put together that it was like this. I thought it was that you just had a house here somewhere. And when I came down here, we stood in this empty paddock at the time and said, oh, about here. So, yeah. It was kind of
It was just waiting for him. All I'd been doing was mowing the lawns ready, keeping it ready for him.
You know, it's seriously, I think it's that sort of generosity. There's not too many architects who'd say, I've got a piece of land, would you like to come and design something on it? And there's not many I can think of who would do that. So
we thought it was out of sight, and if it didn't work, well, we wouldn't have to look at it, you see, so.
Take the road out.
Yeah.
That's it, right?
No, we just grow stuff over it. It's become a way of life, really. It is an interesting thing because it's a completely different kind of conservation. Yet there's, of course, there's the underlying thing of permanence and longevity, as you were saying. One of the humbling things about working with old buildings is really seeing what people do to them and what happens to them over time, especially if they're left alone. And you understand very rapidly, if no one does anything, how quickly nature takes over again. And there's at least that common thread that if you take cattle off this landscape or sheep, and how quickly it reverts. We're just trying to guide the reversion. And in the way with conservation, you're just trying to guide the the recovery and the next stage of life.